All right, let's get started. Welcome to this iteration of the continuous testing podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining. Before we start, let's thank our sponsors, Source Labs, Trending, and To Amusement for making this possible. They take care of the costs that come with hosting something like this and give their employees some time to work on this. So thanks to them. I would also ask you to check out the Continuous Testing Meetup website, where we have our past iterations with video recordings, and you can also see what's coming up next. There is also a link to our Slack group, so if you want to join there, feel free to click the link at the bottom of the page. All right, so I would like to introduce Nataliia to you. She will be talking about the quality assistance model. And without further ado, thank you for joining.
Thank you, sir, for introduction. Let me share my screen. Give me a moment because I have... Sir, would you mind stop sharing your screen so I can do mine? Yeah, yep. Cool.
Done.
Yeah, let's do it again. Give me a second. Yeah. Okay. I suppose you should see my screen with the title of the presentation. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I'm Nataliia. I'm speaking today from the UK. It's already quite like 6 p.m. So, but it was shiny today, so it's a good sunny day, summer. As you can imagine, British summer, it's miss or hit, you know. So today I have joined you to share my experience about working with quality system model and the real reason why we decided to, or why we had a need to move into this, and how we did it, and what actually we learned from there, and how is it going at the minute. But first, I will dive into the actual topic. I'd like to introduce myself. So I'm Nataliia. I work as a senior test engineer at the minute, and soon I will be transitioning to lead role. But I'm also a mom of 7 years old. He's not at home today, otherwise he would dash into the room, and I will be just keep calm and carry on. I love tech, and I was always working in tech. People sometimes asking me like whether I had any other jobs. I'm the person who actually only did tech work, so I'm trying to find other ways if I can do anything else in the future. I'm a self-taught engineer, and I'm always teaching myself, no matter what's coming next. It's never-ending story, as you can imagine. I love reading. I read a lot. I love fiction, mostly. I love running. I'm preparing for my half marathon in October this year, so hopefully it goes well. And I love traveling. So I love traveling, and I travel with my family, with my son since he's 6 months old. And so this year we're gonna have like quite a big travel plans. That's me, what I do outside of work mostly, but let's maybe also talk like professionally wise. As you imagine, it's a big part of my life, of your life, I would imagine as well. And professionally speaking, I was working in software testing for a very long time. I started as a kind of like entry level. I started working on my last year of university. Really didn't know anything about testing. I read the book of Sam Kanner just to understand what it is. Somehow magically, I got my first job and started like growing from there. And I work in different companies that were like big, more settled, with quite like a long history on the market, like travel market or marketplace, or small companies, more like a startup and then scale up. Working in companies that had processes more established, like waterfall or agile, depending what area or what time I was working, or processes that are a bit loose, like startup. If any one of you work in startup, you might know that you move fast, you do many jobs just to get business out to the market or get product to the market. I will be like talking mostly on this presentation in my kind of like last environment that started as a startup and then scale up. And a lot of my talk will be having references to that. So I appreciate that people coming with the different backgrounds, but feel free to make any notes, anything you'd like to discuss, or kind of like explore how things would work in your environment. I would be happy to kind of like discuss and explore together with you. So my last environment, it was a startup, and we recently scaled up a couple of years ago. And it was a very fast-paced environment. In a moment that, for example, if you come back from holidays and you'd like to catch up on Slack, sometimes the messages on Slack are already outdated. So there is no reason to read everything, which I learned from my experience, because things move so fast and you have to be just kind of finding out like what's the most important, or just waiting when things will be coming to you. And when you work sometimes, like often in startups, to have like kind of clear vision and mission. This is how it happened to my company. And communication was very transparent. So we kind of like knew very much what's coming next and what we need to do to help business to grow or succeed. But as you must imagine, like in every environment, you work one way for certain time, and when the company either grow or you build your like a first application, mostly likely it's monolith, right? Just to get something out of the door and test it out there and get the feedback from the market, from the users. And sometimes your processes works well at some moment, but they do not work in the next couple of years, a month, or whatever you want to achieve next. And for us, that was that kind of like, I call it kind of our stuck situation, right? So it doesn't mean it's the situation for most of you or everyone. So it was our way where we got a little bit kind of like stuck how we kind of like develop software. Maybe for many of you, this diagram that I share on the screen is familiar. But let me walk you through why I kind of see it as a bit of stuck situation, and why we needed to reinvent the way we work, or kind of see like what doesn't work or won't work for future goals that we had in our mind. So on the, as you see on the left side, if you see my hand, I'm kind of pointing out to the left side. As usual, development and testing were not really aligned. So the testing didn't really happen on the left side. So you've got development in full speed and everything goes in. And then testers or your quality assurance, quality engineers will come or join the process and start testing what's coming to them, right? So usually it would be kind of like handed over to test engineers or QA engineers and say like, this is your Jira ticket, or this is like your story, this is what's been done, and now please test it. If you're lucky, you have requirements, you know what it is, and you know who developed it. But there are very different situations, right? And then you've got your active phase of testing, and like usually you've got bugs, you've got kind of requirements that mostly of the time might not be kind of caught. You got like different use cases or scenarios, different ways of testing, million of things, right? And this kind of like game back and forth starts, right? And in this huge triangular, a lot of things are happening, and it might take lots of time. The conversations, how to fix, like things like it's a change request, we never discussed this. So it's a lot of activity starting here. But as well, development on the left side is going on as well with the new features, right? Like the work will need to continue. Your development team can't wait when you finish testing and when you can join them later. So that's how we felt. It was a lot of pressure on the right side, and there was also frustration where we not only test engineers but also designers were not like working together with us in the environment where I am. It's very design driven, right? So it's a lot of things driven by design, UX, and research, and we were pretty misaligned, right? So and we knew it's not going to work, because if you wanted to move fast with quality, it's not really like working. That's why I call like stuck situation. And what happens next? What do you do? Right? Like many people work in this environment. I work with every single company as is, right? I'm not saying it's bad. It works for many people. But for us, because we had a mission, I was in a company level, as a business, as a startup, and their mission was that we needed to find some like a model, QA model, that can help companies scale and release more features more often to more people in more places, right? So, and also we didn't want to simply maintain the quality level, but we wanted it continually raising, right? So, and with this mission in mind, we needed to overthink how we work. And luckily, we had people who saw the problem not only in quality, right? Not only on this left-hand side, where I say, oh, maybe we add more testers to the team, or maybe we have more automation in place, or things like that. And if you work in an environment who practice in agile, or in the industry, you might know that adding more people to the team not necessarily will speed up the work, right? Because you have to onboard people, you have to give them time to learn about applications, tools, and everything like that. So your pace of development not necessarily will be faster, right? It might speed up later. I'm not saying that's not a good approach, but how long you can add more people, right? Like how long you can add more testers. If the problem is really not about testers and not about them kind of having that lots of work on the right-hand side. And we improved our processes a little bit. We took some approaches from Agile. We started working a little like more closer with developers. We brought design earlier to the team, not just kind of handed over to our teams as a final copy and then like final design, and then we have to do things, and then we discovered that no, really we can implement it. We also worked on kind of making our releases much smaller, because, for example, when we were releasing native app, we were having a cycle of development for 6 weeks. And that was really long time. And sometimes there were kind of unstructured timing. There would be 5 weeks, 4, 6. Everyone would try to put like a last feature who really wants to make into the release, like very important. But in a startup, everything is very important, right? You want to get as many cool features, improvements, product growth out there as possible. So we work quite closely with different people to make that release smaller. We brought collaboration of QA and developers, designers closer to each other. We got a little bit better with requirements, and we got testing feedback faster, right? But we were still like, as a QA engineers, we still spend lots of time and efforts on testing, right? And we didn't really get velocity that we wanted, right? We were still doing quite a lot of releases to production, native releases, regression, and all those activities, they piled up and they make you kind of like, you work a lot, but necessarily you make an impact, right? And we had quite a lot of thoughts how we can improve like this process, right? It works, but it's still not what we wanted. we wanted to be like even faster, and we wanted to work together with developers, and we wanted a bit more like independence from all this kind of cumbersome activities that we do. And so we had a team who worked together, myself and other leads, and we thought, what if you have as flat process as we can, right? So we don't have developers working on features and then QAs joining somewhere. So what if we have a team who works on the features as a team of engineers, and we're not necessarily having like activities assigned to everyone. You develop, you test, and like product managers will do their testing, or designers will do their testing. In ideal world, like those both, like if you saw those two lines, will merge together. Hence, you can see the width of my process a little bit thicker. It's a kind of like a little bit hidden trick. So those two activities, development and testing, will merge together and work together at the same time. And what really like stop us of doing it? It sounds like very easy, isn't it? Like, yeah, just work together. Like, why not? But in reality, it's not always as easy as just throw this process on a presentation and tell developers to work with QAs and everything will work out. So a lot of work went into this, particularly in changing the mindset of development team, the mindset of as well like testers and engineers, everyone who work in tech, and as well our stakeholders and our like senior people and your product managers. So anyone who works on building the product. Right. So it's a mindset about how people perceive quality and how people perceive testing, and like, and how you can make quality product, right? So you can't always make quality product from just testing, right? You can test as much as you want. You can test forever as long as you have a lot of money or time, right? So testing is never ending activities. But it doesn't always mean that you will have a high quality product, right? And you can write lots of tests, although it's very important. I'm not saying it's not. But still, like your quality of the product is not as you wish to be. And it's very hard to define quality, right? So it's like what it means. For me, means one thing, and for product manager that worked with me means very different things, right? So and then we had to make this statement that quality moving on is everyone's responsibility, right? So it's not only mine, because I have test engineer title or quality engineer title, and I'm directly responsible for that, although that's true, that's type of my role. But also development, like my iOS engineer and Android engineer, designers, and as well product people. They're also responsible for quality, of bringing quality requirements, of understanding like who's this feature is for, how it can be used, and how we can measure success or improvement, right? That also adds on top of quality. And also a lot of people think that the testing or test team is their safety net, right? So developers will develop, will test as much as they can, the best that they can, but they always rely on someone to check their work and tell them to do, sometimes people like developers will tell me to do proper testing. So I don't know what means proper testing, but they will say like, I'll do my best, but there is someone with really kind of great proper testing will make sure it's great, and will tell me if something goes wrong. And that's also stopping us from building quality throughout the process if you think that someone will check and be your safety net, right? So I'm sure even like test engineers don't want to be safety net. And then as well, like reframe excuses that there is no time to write test, and many others things, and time like we have to go quick to the market, we just wrote feature and it works on my machine, all good. Testing we will do later, we will create ticket and add test later. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's not always time you can write, you can create and backfill, that's absolutely fine, as an exception, but you can't make it as a regular process to your development of product feature building, right? A lot of mindset changing, that's only like a snapshot of some kind of the most visual to us that were happening. I'm sure every one of you will have even more or even more kind of like important like changing of mindset. But that was for us. And then we discovered there is a model existing that is called quality assistance, and the model that actually having in the kind of core of the model is promoting ownership of quality to the whole team, right? So everyone is responsible for quality and they play particular role to add to that quality, either you developer or product or design or QA engineer, or even test as even like data analyst, right? And also implies a lot of collaboration from the early stage. And you might think, hold on a second, like, isn't it like shifting left? Are we talking about shifting left? Aren't we talking about agile testing and all those things? Yes, quality system has all those elements. You will need to apply your agile testing techniques. If you have like any collaboration session that you do, bring them on, and shifting left will be important part of your quality assistant model if you haven't done it yet or you're planning to do. But the biggest change and the difference between quality assurance, quality assistant is the role of test engineer, QA engineer, or quality engineer. Many people have different titles. Is that your role changes a little bit. You're not anymore testing after developers, or you're not testing just like requirements, or you don't have like your place when tickets, feature, builds are coming to you. You might look at them in test column or ready for test, depending on what processes you have. You're all changing of empowering team and coaching them how to do testing more effective, more like in more collaborative way, how to share what they do, how they test and teaching each other, right? Your role is changing from just being executing your testing, although you will do as well. It's nothing saying you won't test anymore. But it will also shift to influencing how your team is doing testing, to influencing how product people thinking about quality and testing, and as well influencing other people, how they perceive and how they spend time or allocate time for testing. And you will facilitate different activities, meetings, and obviously you will inspire people kind of with your ways of thinking about testing, the way how would you do, or challenge them as well, right? In a way, have people learn. And once you have all those activities, you will also look at testing quality of your product in a holistic way, right? You will potentially stand up from your usual place, how you work, and you will go on a level higher to look at a couple of teams, how they work together, or even a department, and see where are the gaps and risks your testing is having. Where would potentially your team would need more testing tools to be faster testing, or they would need to have a better test data or quality to as well test more accurately, or test to like personas of the users, anything that would help them to do better testing, even things that would be very hard to set up, but like if you know another way of doing it or faster, or even if you automate like creation of user, so your team can just in a second spin up that test user and use it, right? So you will look at something more on infrastructure level to have team to test, or you will say, oh, I have seen you've been kind of trying to find the way of test it, and I know the way how you can test faster, or I know the way how to test easier. So let me try out this, or what do you think about this approach? And then you work together and saying, so very often when my team is saying, oh, it took me 30 minutes to test this feature, and it's so, it's quick to fix, but it's so long to test it. And I was asking, so what exactly do you think took you so long to test it? And they're saying like setting up environment took me 20 minutes. So, and I look at the, and then I start looking, okay, how can I decrease setting up environment for 20 minutes faster? So, and I work on that and kind of created some jobs or some other tools where they can just have their command run, wait for 5 minutes when environment spins up, and have their test data or users back, environment back, right? So, and then they will have another check for another 10 minutes. So, and they were very happy. So ask them questions, what exactly takes them so long time if they say testing is taking a long time. So yeah, like I say, we wanted to move away from this model, right, where we had lots of frictions and a lot of ping pong games, although it's fun, but not in the software development context. And we wanted to move to this model, which I will explain you in a bit more detailed approach. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize everything what is there, but I'll just quickly say what's the main kind of focus on this model, right? What we wanted to do, we wanted to ship lots of activities to the left, and I will explain how we achieve them a little bit later. Right, we had like collaboration sessions and a lot of things to understand the requirements. How would you build it? How would you test it? Where would you test it? Do you have test data? Anything that you need to deliver end-to-end story of features from requirements to release as an engineer, right? Not as an engineer you develop, I'm a test engineer, will test it, and someone else will do something else. And then we wanted as well do a kind of like shift things to the right, where we wanted to have a chart as well before we release things to production. Just to give you a little bit of context, how we release software in my company, it's a very fast and straightforward way. So if I say here that that's our release process, it is like this, because we have very a highly automated environment, and any engineer can release, even I can release testing, anyone from a development team can release, and in the future we think that as well product people or content people can make changes and as well release. So we don't have any like release process or delivery process when everything gets packaged and goes to production. Any feature goes to production any minute, any 5 minutes, any 10 minutes. So, and it's all automated. That's why I'm saying here as release, because the moment you finish your end-to-end story, you test it, you find to release. And then what happened next, I will also mention later. And here in the middle, what we wanted to do, what it actually means for developers, having more ownership of testing and having more earlier kind of their feedback, how testing is going, and doing them by themselves majority of the things. And you might ask me the question, hold on a second, so what's the test engineers are doing? Are they just staying there and watching? No, not really. So they've got this all spare time. And of course, they support developers on any stage, right? So hence the the model is called assistant. So your role becoming is a lot of assisting, right? It's either discussion, or either you build tools, or you do some activities to help them. But also, once you got this time, so you're not actively testing after developers, you have time to look at, remember, I mentioned this point on holistically, on your testing holistically and providing your testing expertise. So you look at here, you have time. What's the next thing you can make to help your developers or help your team to be more effective, to have more confidence in testing? You look at new tools, you look at upgrading your frameworks. You do a lot of things that not necessarily will be done in a team of feature development, but will help teams. Like imagine yourself as a team of site reliability engineers or DevOps, right? They also build tools to help teams deliver. So that would be as well part of your role. Right, how we got there? It's a good question. It's a lot of things to change. I just realized when I was talking, it's a lot of things to change. And usually people don't like changes. Even if you work in a high-paced, highly adaptive environment, people still don't like changes. It means changing the behaviors, the pattern they got used to, you got used to work with, tools, people you used to talk to. It's hard, right? So it's kind of like you have to figure out like how to work differently if you can't just work the same way. I get it. I'm also falling into that mindset. So I'm also been there, right? But also we rolled out gradually, right? So gradually, that means we had different phases. I will as well explain why not now. We had different phases, how we will get from point where we've been, it's a phase 0, to point of phase 3, the end of phase 3, right? And each of our phases were divided into like specific things that we wanted to introduce. I will explain on the phase 0, it's a little bit different on the top side. And as well, there are things that as a measurement, whether the teams are ready to move from phase 1 or phase X to phase Y, right? So not each team had the same pace, not each team had the same expertise, so the same size. So it was really kind of like looking where that team is ready to move or not, right? At the phase 0, we started as a point where we had kind of like symptoms where things do not work, right? So we had QAs like having a bottleneck in testing, as you said. We had this infamous column in test or ready for test where I still remember you have many tickets piled up and you try to pick up the one from the top, which you think is the highest priority. And they're coming in, you know, because development is moving fast and you just, oh my God, what I'm doing next. So that feeling, I get it, I've been there. And we still were writing lots of tests as well, automation, and as well as manual and as well as exploratory. So it's a lot of things to do. And we were handling as well releases of native apps, regression, and many things like that. So we had this phase 1 and everyone started there, right? So it was a starting point. On the phase 2, on the phase 1, sorry, I'm missing because it's phase 0 then, where we had introduced a couple of things that will help team to be more collaborative, right? We had example mapping, which you might think is a like 3 amigos session, but we do with the whole team. We discussed a lot requirements, how we test. Very simple question that team stocks when I ask, like, so how are we going to test this feature? So I'll try to ask this question if you have that opportunity and see what's coming back, right? So or offer you as well ideas. How would you test? It's very important because often people think they have everything, they know how to test it, but when it comes to testing, it comes to seeing like whether we've done this feature as expected, sometimes you don't have tools and you have to move fast, right? So we had that requirements, and we were having, I'll come back to here, kickoffs and reviews. So it means, kickoffs means you have a ticket, you've got requirements, and you have 5-10 minutes catch up with QA, test engineer, to understand, have I understood everything? Did anything has changed? Let's talk about testing, how we test, why we test, and write everything down, right? So it proven to be very, very useful because sometimes a lot of things will change. And for example, requirements can be discussed with some people, but not everyone, and anyone can pick up, and it gets forgotten, right? So we're all human beings and we all miss stuff, forget stuff. So you discuss and then you're very clear what you have to do. We also introduce reviews. That's at the end of the process when that reviews will answer the questions. Have I developed and tested my feature as it's expected? Does it work as expected, right? And you have that conversation, you look at the test, you might have a PR review, you run a test, you add more tests if you think that something is missing or you just had another idea. And once you're happy and everyone is happy, you can release. So those three things were introduced on phase one. And it was quite easy to say, but obviously each collaboration point you have to work with developers or teams, it requires lots of effort. So we had to previously in the phase 0 teach everyone and train people how to run the sessions effectively, how to run kickoffs and review that effectively. Very, very simple question that we experience that we learn after a month where people were not doing kickoffs and reviews because simply they did not know what it means. It's easy to say, yeah, you have a chat, but what exactly we have to discuss? So then we realized that we need to have some checklists, for example, to help people highlight what points they can discuss, right? Like functional testing, not functional testing, where you test, what type of users you test. So anything that you think, any integration. So that it got better, right? So, but it was like, yeah, we wouldn't know. And we moved from this phase. So everyone, every team moving from one phase to the other had their success metrics, and they would have, for example, trying to introduce those reviews and kickoffs and sessions and try to eliminate in column ready for test in Jira, right? So which means you've done a lot of work in the left. You don't really need to have that column for testing. That was kind of gradual transition because still a lot of complex testing was done by QAs, right? But with the time, it was the requirement that you move to another phase where you shouldn't have that column. On the phase 2, we had kind of shifting ownership for testing more to developers. Once they have already passed the phase 1, they have more understanding, and we're always trying to work together and coach them on testing and other things that makes their development successful. And we try as well hand it over more releases to developers, right? So we share it as well. Native releases for apps, we did some kind of rotas. They understood what it means because before they didn't know what type of activities you have to do, what it means to release native apps. It's huge if you work and and if you don't, believe me, it's huge. We share this rota and then we work together. And the interesting picture on the right that you can see, that will change on the next slide as well. One of the kind of goals for us was, while we try to scale as a business and grow as a business as well on the market, we don't really want to scale massively or in the same way test engineering or quality engineering department, right? Because we try to be fast and release quality software with the same skilled people that we have. We just need to work a bit smarter, not harder, not with many people. That's why one of the kind of objective for us was to have more developers in a team, but having the same amount of QA engineers. Like, for example, first we work as a 1 QA engineers for 5 developers, then it was 6, 7 or 8. It's kind of top because otherwise it's hard as well to work with many developers. You still have your work to do and catch up. So that's the top one. And on the last phase, once teams are having a good grasp of all those 2 phases and they know what they're doing, how they're doing stuff. So for QA engineers, remember there was like increased QA bandwidth. This is where a new staff will come to you as a test engineer. You will look at, see how you can do monitoring, production monitoring once you have released, right? How would you monitor services if something goes wrong? If something goes wrong, what would you like to know and what's important to you, right? So many people might be familiar with on-calls or production incident. So this is why it comes into place. And this is why you might hear as well, like shifting right, more kind of quality, more metrics on the right. So we'll look at this monitoring for different ways, even with different analytical tools. You will work and see how you can mature your testing and how you can kind of increase your quality, right? Either you need to, or you think there is a need to introduce more different type of testing. For example, in my company, we were not doing a lot of exploratory testing. But now we really need, because we lost the understanding a little bit what our system is capable of, like, because we move so fast and sometimes we are surprised what is out there, right? So that's why we need a bit more exploratory testing. At the beginning, the application was small. You were having some different tools, reports and metrics, but you know, sometimes you grow and things are getting quite different. And you would as well mature your tools, whatever you need to mature. You will as well like coach people, new people who come into the company, and you will do lots of onboarding just to make sure they are in the right kind of environment and they know how they work together with you and what to expect from each other. So yeah, that's the phase 3 as well, what I already mentioned, and the number of developers as well will grow. And because your processes are more matured now, they don't need your involvement as much, but they still appreciate your assistance. Did we know that we're doing right? You know, always knowing whether you're doing right, unless you're experimenting and you measuring your impact, are you measuring what the changes are, right? So on every stage of the process, we had like success metrics, and we had some metrics in Jira, we had some metrics in different analytical tools, and we were having kind of survey and feedback from the teams. We had clear, like before we started, we had clear roles and responsibilities in the new process, because like I said, your role is changing a little bit as a test engineer. Developers' roles as well changing, like things kind of worked in a different way. We had exactly like clear expectation of each phase, how to know you achieve what you want to achieve, how do you know you're doing it right, different metrics. And we were training and kind of helping each other and having training across the teams, just to make sure everyone is having the right knowledge and the right expertise. We had very kind of expected timelines. You can't hang out in a team in phase 1 forever. You have to have like 3-6 months, depending maturity or requirements of your team, right? So you have to be focused and you have to make things consistent. We had feedback from the teams. We were implementing different things that didn't work. and we were celebrating like every little success, right? So I remember when we removed in test column already for tests, there was a big success, right? So we knew that we're not going to have that stuck process. We still had a lot to do, but we were already understanding and seeing it's a good feedback. If I were doing it again, which I will actually do in my next role in a new company, would I do it differently? Yes and no. I think as an overall process, I would remain as is. I would make tweaks and be more consistent and focus on what we want to achieve. Right, I would introduce more coaching to teams as well, not only test engineers coaching developers, but also test engineers needs to be coached and needs to be supported. As well, you have to make sure that you adapt your hiring process to find people with the right skills. I learned that not everyone is ready to work in quality assistant model, right? Some people just like to work in traditional way, like in classic way, or just having their place in task and having tasks to be given. People, yeah, that is different. So you need to have people who are ready to be very proactive, who are ready to look at your whole processes and quality in a holistic way and say, I see the gap here. I possibly know, or I don't know the solution yet, but I'm going to have a look. I'm going to read around. I'm going to speak to developers. I'm going to have a chat, but I definitely see the problem here. And if there is a solution, it will help us to be faster, better, more collaborative. And keep consistency from the beginning till the end, right? So it's very hard. It's a human behavior to keep consistency, and it's hard to master, but it's absolutely necessary if you do process changes. If you scale up in a company, please make sure that you have a robust processes, right? Because scaling up means you do your work, but you also have new people coming in, right? And if you're new people, not having those processes and introduction and having a clear understanding, it's really hard to have this model successful. And there could be frustration, obviously, and then you think that that you might need to do something different. So just like have this in mind if you're going to work in scale up and startups. And it's coming to the end of my presentation. So I thought that actually 50 minutes, that's a lot of time. I was even like thinking, how many slides do I need to put it? But thank you so much. It's been great. And if you'd like to connect, please check out the QR code in LinkedIn. I would be happy to meet you. Or if you think you would like to have a chat about quality assistance or maybe anything else, you can schedule a session on ADP list using this QR code, and we could have the chat in more details. Thank you so much for having me tonight, and I hope we could have a nice discussion.
Thank you, Nataliia. Great talk. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or write them in the chat. So just to get things started, what would you say? Let's say you go to your new job and you find one big QA column on your board that is full of tasks, and they tell you, how could we possibly change the process now? Can't you see we're already behind? Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's so much to test right now. What do you
Yeah.
tell them? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say you have to remove your column. You know, I say like, okay, tell me a little bit more. How we got there, right? Like how we got to this in test column. Just to make sure, I have no objections against in test column. Have no objections against any process people do, and obviously I'm not preaching for this model would work for everyone. But if there is a problem in test column that it gets stuck, people get stressed and things are not moving forward and moving backwards, then there is a problem, not in people. And like I said, I would ask, let's have a chat how we got there. Let's have a chat how we can offload, right? And seeing what's happening before. And I would have a chat with multiple people. Either it's your developers, either it's your product. If you have Scrum Master, you have a delivery, just have a conversation. Ideally, you use the same set of questions just to have a quality kind of data, like consistency, just understanding how people understand or having answers to the same question. What's their perspective, right, from every corner? And then I would go away and say, let's do some changes to make sure that we're not stuck there. And I would suggest that you can fully remove, if you move your processes up there to the left, right? If you have your right expertise, if you have as well, don't get me wrong, this model doesn't work in isolation if you don't have a high quality pipelines and DevOps team that work with you and build your delivery pipeline, CI, or teams, right? So maybe your environment is not stable enough or not having everything. So testing takes a very long time. And then I would suggest some recommendations, and then we would work through and see how we can make it.
Perfect, thank you. Could you maybe go into a little bit more detail on success metrics? You mentioned them a couple of times. Is that something role-based or person or team-based, or how? What are you measuring?
Right. It's mostly it's a team-based, right? So with this model, we try to have everyone as an engineer, and there's no like particular you're doing this or you're doing that. And success metrics would be, for example, we would like to have kickoffs and reviews mostly the same number of tickets, like in a very kind of like quantitative measurements, like numbers, if you want to have, right? So which means every story gets conversation, and every story gets as well conversation to know what's happening. So we will have as well success metrics as a feedback from the teams, and a little bit more like qualitative way. What else we would also have a metrics who is doing like reviews and kickoffs. Are there people still doing with QAs or people doing with developers, right? So they don't need you for every story. As well, there was like a test matrix. We would expect that the number of test coverage, although it's no indicator of quality, but it should grow, right? Because with this model, we also had like more tests to build in place. We would also have a measurements of production incidents, or understanding what type of production incidents there are. And it seems like if you have one of the metrics would be not having it, but all, you build software, there always kind of like a gap for any issue to go out. If there is, so we would look at the nature, either we missed a test, or either we missed a requirement, or some other integration or things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself or write in the chat.
I have one. We already spoke, me and Nataliia, about it, but just to also align the people. Okay, what would you suggest in situations where developers are under pressure from the business to produce and develop and produce, and at the same time have this feeling that QAs or testers are here to test? So they mainly have pressure to produce, to release, and at the same time, they know that there are people that are hired for this. If we want to change the mindset.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I might have to speak for another 50 minutes. I think we still have I still have some people that I kind of see a difference how they perceive my role and what I should do and what I'm supposed to do. I don't have a simple answer to that. I think it's just understanding what your role is, right? If you or what's like if you've been or if your processes is if your organization thinks that test engineers they're gatekeepers and then should do to make sure the quality is high, they will be perceived that way. But it's also, yeah, it's a hard one. I don't have an answer. I think it's more on.
I think you actually answered it a little bit earlier when you said that you basically asked the developers what was so hard about the testing, and they said 20 minutes of setup or something like that, right? That's what you work on, and then you directly remove pain from the developers, and so they don't expect you to be the person that tests anymore because you enable them to test, right? So,
yes.
And I think that works, yeah?
It's very good kind of command. I think, you know, I find testers like very valuable when they ask the questions, when they are not just doing job what's been given them to do, but they also ask a question like, can I do it differently? Like, could we do earlier? Or so they ask the question like, oh, what is so painful, and have a conversation. So it's so test engineer role is a hard one, because you facilitating the whole team, no matter how you work, and kind of a lot of success of the team would actually be defined how you get your work set up. So if you set up in a way that you just test, I think this is how you will be seen. If you set up in a way how you create partnership with developers and you're able to hold a conversation with them on the same level and asking questions or asking technical questions, you will be perceived differently. If you asking or collaboration or I think it's all depends. You're not sure I answer your question, so it was very kind of blurry answer. I get it, but it's one of the hardest thing.
Yeah. We actually have a question from Christian, which is basically the same, but the other way around. How do you convince developers to test? And because they also have a full to-do column. Yeah. So how do you make that switch? That's kind of the mirror image of that question. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So it depends whether to do column means. If historically it means just developed your feature and hand over to QAs, they will do that. And they will keep doing it unless you will change the way what it means that story to be done. And you know, it's very hard to do things if you're doing on your own. You have to have support from other people. And believe me, if your presentation took 50 minutes to deliver, that was, I think, 2 years from a point where we had a bit stuck situation to where we succeeded. So it takes lots of time, and it took us lots of time to tell developers you have to test, to convince them that if it takes more time now, you will be in a win situation later because it will help you later. So and they have to test their code. That's as simple as that, right? It's a statement. It's not a question. It's not a favor. And you have to be persistent on that, right? And you have to advocate for that, and you have to keep doing focus and saying you need to write your unit test. It's simple. It sounds simple, but I think it just takes time to shift that mindset, as well, to change the expectations. I tell sometimes, which a little bit maybe like a little bit harsh, but I say like, the feature is not done if you haven't written your test, you know. So like, how do you know it's working? You know, I can't do job for you. I can do many different things to help you, but you need to make sure that it's done with tests. Yeah, but you have to be ready to have the conversation with developers, and find some arguments, and be stubborn as they are sometimes, and just hopefully one day it will stick. But you need to have support. You're not doing anything on your own, because it's harder thing to do on your own.
Yep. Thank you very much. So yeah, to add to this, I've been in a similar situation, and one of the most important things we did was not measure how many tickets are moved out of ready for development or to do or something like that, but only measure what is completely finished. And that doesn't mean it left the development column and it's now in the QA column, but only measure what is done. And that means deployed, or at least in a deployable state and done with the whole team. And that made a very big difference for us, because before it was mostly developers throwing something over the wall, and there might be somebody else over there to catch it or not. They don't really care as long as it's over the wall. It's not their problem anymore. And we had a similar situation, not about removing the QA column, but we actually had such a long process that it didn't fit on a single Java board. And so we had one big board, one big process that was split into a development board and a QA board. And that made this whole situation so much worse. And our big success moment was when we fit the whole process on one board, basically. And yeah, so kind of like removing the QA column for you. All right. Any other questions? All right. Then thank you very much. I would like to wrap it up and share my screen again. Did I hear another question? No, last chance? Okay. Then thank you, Nataliia. It was a great talk. The next talk is coming up August 7th. We have a returning guest. Vitaly is back. He has been here before about a year ago, I would say, I think in maybe August. And he is back with a topic of QA processes, or QA for processes, and starting with hiring. Interesting topic. I haven't heard a talk on this before. So if you are interested, check out our website for any other topics on this. Also, there will be a recording of this talk. So if you want to share this with a colleague, or if you want to look something up, feel free to check out the website in, I would say, what do you say already, in 3 days, 4 days, something like that. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice evening. Thank you for spending your time with us. Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye.
You.